Amazing. Thanks, Joe. Yes, so I was just getting to the next bit on thanks, Joe. Thinking about monitoring and evaluation, which I know is everybody's favorite job, but it's one of those things that is really essential to being able to put together good fundraising applications. So it is an ongoing, continuous job throughout the year. We're collecting qualitative and quantitative, so numbers about things like how many people are coming to your events, how many events have you run, how many volunteers have you got, and then the really nice supporting stories that go with that as well. Yeah, it's really important to be kind of capturing this stuff because it's the content essentially of your applications, really, alongside your vision for the future. And also, just to shout out, we do also provide template data logs at CAG. Hopefully all of your groups should have received one earlier this year, where basically we have put together a template of the things that it would be useful for you to be capturing, which is helpful to us in terms of our own reporting, but it's there also as a tool for CAG groups themselves to be tracking what they're up to. So if you do not know where your CAG data log is, please get in touch. And actually, maybe we can share that as well, Joe, as part of the follow-up from the call, just to make sure everyone has got those. Yeah, and then also communication. So just thinking, again, this is all part of the broader storytelling that helps to support your fundraising efforts. So collecting things like photos and videos, obviously always with permission around that. And yeah, it helps to bring your applications to life, which makes them much more exciting to fundraisers when they can actually see what you're doing. In terms of an online presence, I know that this is something that, a lot of groups do have, things like Facebook pages or whatever. Not everybody can do that, and completely appreciate that an online presence is often a nice add-on rather than the core, a core part of what groups are able to do in terms of capacity. But if you are able to do it, that's really, it can be really helpful in terms of grant makers finding you, thinking about how you can be helping to raise their profile. And also it can be really helpful for generating other revenue through things like community fundraising, because it's another ready-made audience there that could be targeted for different kinds of fundraising. Just to flag as well, if you are keen to learn a bit more about communications in general, we are running a workshop on the 1st of December, which will follow up with details after that. Are you all right? Just hop to the next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of finding funding, so once you're kind of ready to go and you've got those building blocks in place, these are just a few ideas of places to look. So we at CAG, we manage Joe is amazing at putting together our open source funding database, where we collate opportunities that we come across that we think would be great for CAGs to apply for. We then also share these in our newsletter. So if you don't have access to either of these, please get in touch, and we can also send them out afterwards. A few other places, the Directory of Grant Making Trusts, which is a free resource if you have an income below £5,000. The Charity Excellence Database is again free. OCBA is a good place to look. Also, the council do offer district grants, sometimes according to district, and also places like local supermarkets as well. I'm sure you've all seen the kind of token schemes that are run often in Tesco's or places like that. Those are all places that you can be looking for money, really. And I'm sure there's loads more, but we will follow up with this list as well. But just to give you some ideas of where to get started. Joe, are you all right to go to the next slide? Oh, great, thanks. So yeah, just thinking around a kind of timeline once you've then located your grant that you want to apply for. Again, hopefully this doesn't sound too obvious, but I think it's always worth reminding about these different things. So when you're approaching an application period, thinking about the time frame, how long have you got before the deadline? I always find it helpful to kind of set mini deadlines ahead of that. So I've got kind of core targets that I'm working towards. especially if it's a bigger application where I know that I need to reach out to other team members. So for example, do I need to work with the treasurer, the person that manages the finances, to get different reports from them? Do I need to talk to our garden volunteers who've got all the photos from the latest events? So just thinking, building in that time so that it can avoid any last minute rushes as much as possible. And also thinking about different needs as well. I think, you know, the person that's working on fundraising, do they have access needs in terms of being able to things like learning difficulties or different areas like that, of where actually they may need broader support from the wider team, and how can as a collective group the organization support each other to make the best of a funding application. In terms of writing, I would always aim for at least 2 drafts if possible. I know it's not always possible in terms of time constraints, especially if you come across the grant the day before it's due, that's fine too. But yeah, always just holding in mind as well to make sure to be answering what they're asking. And I think it's often very easy when you're really passionate about something. Again, I say this as someone who has done this, to go off on, I've been known to go off on my own tangents in funding applications, and then it's when someone else has read it and gone, let's draw this back actually to what they're trying to get out of you. So it's just helpful in that sense to then, as part of the editing process, have someone else read it. Spellings as well. So it's a difficult one. I was speaking to a grant maker recently who told me that they receive so many applications that they will often use spelling errors as a way of sifting through, which I mean, personally, I don't agree with that. I think it's not fair, because it's assuming a certain level of education and a certain level of, you know, that's an access barrier in terms of who is actually able to get to that funding if some are automatically being dismissed. But I think, unfortunately, this is clearly happening. So I think it's, you know, something to pay attention to. And again, also ensuring that all details are correct, including things like your bank details on applications. Joe, if we're right to just hop to the next one. Thanks. Yes, so once you've got the grant through the door, celebrate first and foremost, because it's amazing and it's and it's something to be celebrated. Then in terms of doing the work that's been funded, so making sure to account for your funds correctly, keeping track of where the money's going. Most funders will want to see that, probably aligned with a budget that you might have had to provide. As I kind of touched on before, making sure to gather data, taking photos and videos. And I think one of the most important things as well is around maintaining good communication with the funder themselves, even though they might have given you the money and sort of off you go to get on with it. If you have the capacity to, I mean, obviously in line with their reporting requirements, but just, you know, the awareness that how this relationship is handled might set you up for future funding. So, you know, always where possible with volunteer capacity, keeping them in the loop, meeting the reporting deadlines, setting reminders for those kind of things, just to keep a good working relationship going there. So that's quite enough from me. Hopefully that has been helpful as a bit of an overview. I'm going to hand over now to Tila from Banbury CAG, who's going to share some more of her experiences with us. And then we'll come back together for a Q&A afterwards. So if you've got any questions, if you could just hold on to those for now. But yes, I will mute myself. Tila, are you all right in terms of sharing your screen there?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, I'm sharing it now, right? And then
yes,
slideshow. Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you all see my slides?
Yep, that's good. Right.
Yeah, so my name is Tila. I'm originally from Mexico, but I'm living in Banbury. And I am the garden officer at Bridge Street Community Garden, which is part of Banbury Community Action Group. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our journey over the past 18 months. So I am not a professional grant writer, and basically I have been doing my job as a bit like, yeah, just learning from the experience. Eleanor mentioned learning disabilities. I'm dyslexic, and I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. So if I can apply for funding and be successful, then I feel like anyone else can. And I'm just gonna tell you about how we have been doing it. I kind of feel like it's not the only way, it's just one of the ways. And I find applying for funding very time consuming. And I think this is because of my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and also because I'm dyslexic and English is not my first language. And it has been like a massive learning adventure. And so it has been great because I've learned so much, but also it kind of shows, yeah, I guess that anyone can do it. So yeah, so I'm gonna show you some slides. Let's see. Okay, I'm just gonna move this a little bit. Okay, so I started working as the garden officer a year and a half ago, and I manage the day-to-day running of the garden. So I basically do a little bit of everything: fundraising, working with volunteers, community outreach, scheduling the events program, running gardening session, doing the social media, getting the resources and materials, doing lots of research. I'm not a professional gardener, so everything I do, I need to learn, which means I have to be very open about how other people do things. And I think this is very beneficial running a community garden, because I try to incorporate different ideas. And I think that's beneficial for grant applications. Yeah, Eleanor was talking about how you talk about your vision and structure and sort of like the narrative of your group in the project that you're trying to do. So at the very start, when I first started working at the community garden, a lot of the planters were falling apart. So we needed to refurbish the garden. So one of the first things we did is we created a new garden design. So this is what you can see on your screens. We kind of designed a way of working as a group and a way of inviting other groups to work with us. And I feel like this was very important, because whenever we applied for a grant, we always came back to this. The design is basically lots of large hexagonal beds. You can see here that the longest bed is 280 centimeters. So that gives you kind of an idea of how big these are. Yeah, the idea is that we invite different community groups to take responsibility of one or more hexagons. So essentially, it's a community garden made out of community planters. And this way, each group can take responsibility of their own little space, but also share knowledge and ideas with the others. And so I run community workshops with the various groups, and also events where we invite everyone, and then we all come together to do things. And we're growing a food forest garden. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but basically, it's a system which mimics the edge of a woodland. And so you have different layers of plants of different heights. Yeah, so basically creating this initial sort of plan was very important, because it meant we were all on the same page. We all knew what we were aiming for. And also, let's see. Oh, it jumped quite a lot. Yeah. So is this the next slide? Oh, sorry. So here you can see how we have developed the garden. These are the beds, how it looked in August 2021. Can you see my mouse moving over the images? Yeah, cool. And this is how they looked in the summer. So basically we dismantled all these beds and we repurposed the soil. Yeah, and basically we built these big beds and we transferred, and we tried to use as many recycled materials. This is the other thing, you know, every element of the design went back to our principles as a group, using recycled materials, working together as a group, growing food, being environmentally friendly, using a gardening system which is very eco-friendly. Then again, this is another example of how the garden has changed over the past few months. Yeah, and this is how it looked in August, and then this is how it looked very recently. And yeah, an important aspect of our design is that it's modular, meaning that different hexagons can be built little by little. So we can apply for funding gradually. It's not all or nothing. We can say, look, if you give us funding, we would build 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hexagons, depending on how much yeah, we're applying for. So we did this, Eleanor was mentioning time constraints, also because it allows us to kind of learn from the experience and see how much we can handle as a group. And also doing gardening, it depends on the seasons. Obviously in the summer, lots of groups want to engage with us. And over winter, it slows down a little and we have to then work with groups that are a bit more, I don't know, outdoorsy, let's say, like not being afraid of getting wet and cold. Okay, let's, yeah, so I am not a professional grant writer, as I mentioned, and our applications are all about working as a team. Eleanor mentioned kind of looking at what the grant is asking for and getting various people involved. So I talked to the other people in the group about the ideas. This is very important. And obviously I need lots of bits of information from them, like the accounts, like all sorts of paperwork, basically. So at the beginning, getting all these bits is quite time consuming, but once you have it all, applications do tend to ask for the same documents. Obviously bank accounts, bank account statements need to be, you know, the most recent one, but other bits can be recycled up to a certain extent. So yeah, we have been very lucky in that we have been able to receive a significant portion of the funding to refurbish quite a lot. Yeah, for some reason it's not allowing me to, yeah. So here, all the yellow hexagons we have done already, and the white ones are the ones that we still have to do. So it gives you an idea of how far. So this blue one here, this blue hexagon is actually a pergola. So that was like one bit of funding where I was really, really busy and I just felt like overwhelmed. And then I read about this funding application that I was pretty sure we could get it, but I just didn't have kind of like the mental bandwidth to sit down and turn all my ideas into text. So I reached out to a member of the committee and I said, can we meet for coffee? I know we can get a good feeling about this, but I just don't have the mental capacity to do this. And we just discussed it. She took lots of notes and then she emailed me the notes and I just copied and pasted them into the application. And then we did get it. So we're very lucky as a group in that we are very flexible and we kind of just go with the flow and support one another. So this is one example of how you can support each other as a group. So yeah, let me go back to, yeah, this is the pergola that we built. So yeah, the fact that I'm not a professional grant writer, I think has worked in my favor because I feel like I'm not using the same language as perhaps professional grant writers. So people that read them are kind of like, oh, this feels very unpretentious and like very grassroots. And I feel maybe, I mean, I don't know this, I'm just kind of imagining what grant writers think when they're reading grant applications that I've written. It maybe feels like genuine, like, oh, this is really like the community doing this, you know. The community garden is in a deprived area where I also live. So I know a lot of people that come to the garden. I'm doing it because I genuinely care about my neighborhood. And, you know, I know a lot of other families that live here, and I want to create this green space essentially for my family and the other families. And I think having a personal connection to the project that you're doing, I guess kind of shows in the way I write and the way I express it, like, you know, it's for the community and I'm part of that community. It's a bit sticky. I'm trying to get to the next slide. but it's not letting me. Let's see. Oh, it went too many. So I feel that we have been quite lucky in that popular themes that are being funded at the moment, or that were funded a few months ago, were very much in line with our interests. So we started applying for bids right at the end of lockdown, really. And there was a lot of funding going for doing things outdoor in nature, learning new skills around food and growing food. Yeah, this fit really well with what we were interested in doing. So maybe it was a mix of, yeah, good luck and also, yeah, our interests. And yeah, Eleanor mentioned kind of like lining up some of what you're doing so that it fits with what people are funding. So one of the things we decided to do is to have like soup in a mug events with like veggies that we're growing. And because one of the bids we're applying to was all about sharing food. So then that kind of shaped a little bit of what we were doing. So yeah, maybe sometimes funding applications can give you ideas about things that you can do. And actually that was a very enjoyable activity. At some point we got 60 people coming and we all made this massive soup. And yeah, it was like a really lovely thing to do. Let's see if I can. I don't know why it's, yeah, okay. So did it jump? Yeah. Why is it doing this? I don't understand. Okay. So yeah, as I said, our garden is in the very deprived area, but it's richly cultural at the same time. So we try to include as many people from the neighborhood as possible. And we're also open to like learning new skills and growing vegetables that people want to grow because you know, there are things that they want to eat. Okay, so Anna wants to, okay, somebody, thank you. So yeah, the fact that I'm not a professional gardener means that I have to be very open about learning from other people. And I think that gives people a sense of ownership. And again, this is something I write in my application. So sometimes having a certain barrier, you can kind of turn it around and think, well, actually it is a barrier, but it isn't, because it means that I have to be very open. So yeah, when you're part of a group, obviously you cannot do everything yourself and you have to be very open. And this is something that you can write about. Yeah, so something that all the applications have in common is that they asked us to include hard to reach groups of all ages and abilities. I'm just trying to go to the next slide. Yeah, I'm gonna have to move this so that I can see. Okay, so so we have partnered with about 8 local community groups. And as a result, it means that we get like a regular influx of people, which is very beneficial because instead of trying to reach out and kind of putting a general call out for volunteers and then getting 5 or 10 people and like not really knowing, if you include existing community groups, then you know that you're going to be working with a larger group and you're going to be able to get more jobs done, I suppose, and engage with more people. So this is something we really wanted to do, and it has worked really well for us. Come on, come on. I don't know why it's not letting me go to the next one.
Down arrow, Tila, if you're not
Yeah,
using.
I'm trying that. It doesn't work.
It was a bit glitchy.
Oh, there. Okay, it's working now. Okay. So one of the applications, I just want to make sure, yeah, one of the applications I actually really enjoyed doing. I usually do not enjoy grant writing whatsoever, I have to say. I do it because I really believe in the project and I want to do it, and that's what drives me. And I have to make myself do it. But this particular grant application was much easier because I got the sense that whoever put it together really paid attention to groups and the way they work. And it felt like it was tailored for a group like ours. So this was the Together for Our Planet application from the National Lottery Community Fund. The questions were really straightforward. You didn't have to write very much. And they didn't ask for a massive breakdown of like a budget. They just asked for like chunks of how much money you need for like the various headlines. And also they funded, my arrow is not working again. Come on, don't do this to me, please. Oh, maybe I just have to be patient. This is it. Let's see. I'm just gonna press it once and then wait. There you go, okay. So yeah, the application was very reasonable, very straightforward questions, and it funded people's time, training, and core costs. And these are three things that a lot of applications, a lot of funding bodies, or what you want to call them, do not pay for. And this one did, and it allowed us to then reach to other funds to apply for other bits to make the most of this fund. And I'm doing lots of training. So I feel like even though I'm not being paid for all my hours, I basically volunteer like half my time and I'm being paid half. Yeah, basically being able to access training, like it means like, yeah, I just feel like I'm being rewarded by volunteering basically. And also this particular grant focused on a lot of things that we care about as a group. So it was all about doing things for the community, the climate crisis, taking action, being resilient, and also learning. So yeah, basically I just felt like they really cared about community groups like ours, and they understood how we work. And they were basically saying, look, learn more about the climate crisis and what you can do as a community. You don't have to have it all figured out. And so I kind of felt like it gave you enough freedom to kind of make the most of it. So this particular one was different from the others.
Sorry, Tila, I really don't want to rush you in any way. I've just got one eye on the time.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
it's so interesting as well. I'm sure people are gonna have so many questions. But
no,
yeah.
I speak a lot, so yeah, I'm gonna go there. Yeah, sorry. So basically volunteering is a privilege. I can afford to volunteer all my time, and I feel like people who manage community projects should be paid for at least some of their time. And yeah, so if I can send a message to people giving out money, it would be like, yeah, please fund people's time and core costs, especially. Yeah, I'm trying to get to the next one. Come on. Yeah, so basically I really believe in the philosophy of my group. So yeah, I'm really thrilled and uplifted whenever I get funding. Whenever our applications are successful, it feels amazing. You talked a little bit about the process that I go through. I'll just go through it really quickly. I read the application several times and I try to understand why they're asking you what they're asking you. I highlight and make lots of notes. I think about how the ethos of that application fits with the ethos of our project. I think very carefully about each question, and I try to imagine why they're asking you that from their standpoint. And then I think about how that fits with what we're doing. I write and delete and write again, you know, because I have a learning disability, maybe other people can be a lot more efficient at this. A very important thing is somebody who, many years ago, somebody who judged applications, I don't know what the word is, decided whose application was successful. She told me not to write things like excellent, brilliant, beautiful. you basically want to write it in a very matter-of-fact way so that the person who's reading your application goes, wow, this is amazing, I want to give them money. So you try not to judge your own project. So this is what I have done. Yeah, so again, talking to people from my group, sharing ideas. I use Grammarly, and then I ask others to read it, which is what Eleanor mentioned. Yeah, and then you need a lot of documents. And even though I try not to, I always work until the last minute before I submit it. This has to do with the way my brain works. And then I submit it and I try not to think about it. I just try to move on to the next thing. And I'm nearly at the end. Yeah, maybe my keyboard is not working. Sorry. I think I pressed it too many times.
It's all good, don't worry.
Yeah. I should have just let Joe be in charge of this. Yeah, so you talked about the main challenges at the moment, and it's basically like I am so busy trying to finish my current targets. I don't have time to apply. Well, I have applied to a few things and we're waiting, but there's going to be a few months probably, or weeks or something, where we don't have any money coming in and we have to then spend time applying. Yeah, so I'm interested to know how other groups kind of handle this. I just feel like we're in a perpetual kind of cycle, always thinking about what's next. And it's not always easy. Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, it was very chaotic.
No, that was brilliant, Tila. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's so rich. And I love all the pictures that you've got there as well. I guess just a couple of initial reflections from me before opening up for questions. I think what you're saying around the personal commitment, we can absolutely tell how passionate you are about this work. And I'm sure that, well, I mean, the success that you've had, I'm sure that's really coming through in all of your applications. And I think to pick up on a couple of things, one of which you're talking about core costs as well. Yeah, I didn't mention this before, like how important it is to build people's time into your project plans and budgets, because I think so often, exactly as Tila's saying, it's really difficult to find specific core cost funding. So it's really important that you're covering people's time in the course of your other project-based applications. But yeah, I've got an eye on the time, but I'm just thinking, should we have 5 minutes or so of any questions for Tila now, and then we'll come back as a group at the end after Rachel's shared as well. But yeah, does anybody have any questions at the moment? Andy?
Yes. Before you had the hexagon idea, did you go through other ideas of design? Because obviously that has helped you in trying to get funding, but just interested how you came about with the hexagon idea.
Yeah, so there is this man called Anthony Melville who is growing a food forest garden in Oxford, and we are both part of the same Tree Collaborates group, which is another Oxfordshire CAG group, people that are interested in growing trees. And he did a presentation about his forest fruit garden in Oxford. And then he said, if anybody is interested in growing a food forest garden, get in touch. And I was quite obsessed with food forest gardens, and I knew that's what I really wanted to do. So I reached out to him and I told him about the limitations of the space. Basically, I haven't said this, but underneath our plot, there is a thick layer of concrete. So we have to grow everything on raised beds. The land belongs to both Banbury Town Council and Sherwood District Council. And we have an agreement with them that we can use the land as long as we don't dig. And we can't dig because there's a thick layer of concrete. So everything has to be built in raised beds. And basically, forest food gardens are not usually grown in raised beds. So I reached out to him and I said, can we do this? And he said, well, you have to build beds as big as possible so that there's room for all the roots. And so we talked about the idea, and basically a scaffolding company had donated loads and loads and loads of scaffolding boards. And so, yeah, food forest gardens are all about using the resources that you already have. And so we talked about the materials, and he said, I don't like rectangular beds, and he doesn't either. And he said, why don't you build big hexagons? And I was like, this is brilliant. You know, it like celebrates the bees. It allows us to use the scaffolding boards that the company donated. So we built them as big as we could with the scaffolding boards that we had. Most of them were like 150 centimeters long. So we thought, oh, if we cut the segments at 140, then that's as big as we can go. So we kind of based it around the forest food garden idea and the resources. And we, food forest gardens are all about creating like like layers. So we thought, okay, we can put a tree in the middle and then all the other plants around. And so, yeah, it was basically a mix between the limitations of the site, the materials that we had at hand, and the system that we were trying to create. And then, you know, incorporating all the different groups, it all just basically fit quite nice. But we only had one design, and that was basically it. So yeah, Andy Melville basically helped me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Does anybody have any pressing questions for Tila before we move on to Rachel, or there'll be time as well at the end? Yeah, great. Tila, are you okay to just stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect, thank you. Great. Lovely, so over to Rachel.
A bit like everybody else, I'm not a professional fundraiser either. So I've been working in the nature conservation sector for about 20 years now. And as an employee, and also as somebody who's active in my local community conservation group, I've been the person who's had to fill in grant application forms. So I wanted to just give you some hints from my experience of doing that, and then also talk to you a little bit about the funding that we have at TOE that we can give to you, and I think, you know, we might be the answer to some of your dreams. So I would like to hope. So I've raised over £500,000 for a project I worked on in the Chilterns, which was sort of partnership funding from all sorts of different people, but a huge slug from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Before I worked at TOE, I successfully got 3 different grants from TOE, and now I'm here on this side giving them out, and so I know what it's like. And every project is different, whether you're giving the money away or you're applying for it. There are lots of different ways to raise money, but as Eleanor said to start with, you can get a lot of good money quite easily if you apply for grants. But it is time consuming, and funders ask you questions not to be painful, but because they need that information. So before you apply for grants, generally it's good to get other sorts of voluntary income, and this is because then when you're putting together a project, and most funders will fund something which is new rather than your day-to-day stuff, a lot of funders will want to see some sort of match funding. So it is actually worth doing the tin rattling or local fundraising, whether it's, you know, having a raffle or whatever it might be, a sponsored event, accepting one-off donations. If you have a little bit of money behind you, assuming you're not a CIC and it's going to cause issues with your accounts, then that can be really helpful, because it gives you a bit of match funding so that you're putting some money in to demonstrate how much you want a project to go ahead. It's worth looking at trusts. Family trusts, of which there are a number across Oxfordshire, usually give grants somewhere in the region of £500 to £2,000, and so they can be a very good source of money. Most funders like to see not only that you're putting some of your money in, but they are also match funding. You know, somebody else has put some money in, because partnership funding is a very strong way of getting something going ahead. And Tila's enthusiasm came through in her application to TOW, which was successful. And one of the things that we liked was the fact that it was hexagonal beds. And so we were paying for some and we knew that other people would be paying for others. And that's what I mean about different people contributing money to make a project happen. Don't forget local businesses. Corporate social responsibility is really big. And whether they're giving you money or whether they're lending members of their staff team to give you labour, then that's always well worth remembering. Philanthropists, don't be scared to ask somebody if you know in your community, if you know that they might be able to give you some money. And £50 here or £100 there does actually add up when you get a few different people giving you that sort of amount of money. And that ties in with what Eleanor was saying about going to local supermarkets, because that's the token schemes are well worth it. So just as sort of thinking those things through, the best fundraising returns come from legacies and trusts and businesses, and you can raise a substantial amount of money from grants and project funding, but very often grants are tied to very specific pieces of work, and you need to be aware of that. You don't want the tail to be wagging the dog. So whereas the voluntary income that you get from the sponsored walk or whatever it might be can normally be spent on anything. And so Tila mentioned core costs. Not all funders pay core costs. Many of them won't. We will pay some. Not everybody asks us, but we do pay some. But if you've got unrestricted income from your tin rattling or your sponsored walk, then that can cover some of those expenses for you. So what's the first step really to find the money? Oh, yep, okay, that's the slide. Thanks, Joe. The first thing, no, back one, please, is devise a project and cost it out. It doesn't, the budgets are really important because people want to know why you're asking for a certain amount of money. It's not sinister. It's just if you say you want £10,000, why do you want £10,000? TOW doesn't necessarily want you to look for the cheapest option. We want your project to succeed, and in fact Tila's project as an example of this is where we ended up giving her more money than she'd asked for. So thinking about your project and what you're wanting to spend money on is really helpful for the funder because they might be able to provide you with some advice. So Eleanor's mentioned some places where you can go for money. So as time's rolling on, I won't spend lots of time on that, but if you're talking to me about how TOW might help, then it's really important to match your project to the funder and to very carefully read the guidance, because it's important that what you're asking money for is something that they can fund. And it's a waste of your time and the funder's time if you haven't made that connection right at the very beginning. And there's just, as Tila said, time is precious and resources are limited. And so it's really important to get that right. So not every funder will talk to you, but if you can talk to them, please do, and check what strings are attached. And another thing that is quite important to know when you're raising money is that some funding is very time limited. You might have to spend the money and complete the grant within a fixed period of time. So if it's going to take you 2 years to do something, but the people you're thinking about applying money for have only got that money for 1 financial year, then that's not going to work for you. So sometimes funders have rolling programs of sort of funding cycles, and that's what we do at TOW. So it could be quarterly, which is what we do. It could be once a year. It could be every month. So get that bit right and think about the work that you're doing as well, because a lot of work is sensitive in terms of the season of the year. If you're planting a tree, you want to do it at this time of year. If you're doing something to a footpath, you need to do it in the summer when the ground is dry. So you need to have your funding secured at the right time of year to do the work. Okay, so Jo, please may I have the next slide? Thank you. So that's sort of talking about the planning your project and thinking about the different options and how it might work in with the funder. Writing a good, straightforward application is really important. Read the guidance that the funder has produced. Talk to them. Check what their requirements are and what the strings are. Different funders want a different level of engagement. Eleanor mentioned that you're setting out I think a long relationship. You know, be nice to your funder. You want their money. You know, be polite. Thank them. Be friendly, because it's rude not to if you want to take their money. See how often they want you to be in touch. You know, we just say to people, let us know how it's going and let us know lots of information at the end. So Eleanor's points about monitoring and evaluating your project throughout the whole process are really important. And as she said, the data that you're collecting in terms of statistics might be tedious, but it's being asked for a reason, and we get our money from different people and we have to report to them. So one of the good things about networks like the CAG, and we do the same with people who have grants from us, is we try and put you in touch with each other, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel. You have an idea, and as Tila mentioned, you know, the likelihood is somebody's done something similar somewhere else in Oxfordshire, and so whether it's going from a rectangle to a hexagon, it's having an idea that makes sense and is easily replicable. And I think that's really helps make a community project fly. So please may I have the next slide? I'm repeating myself in some ways, but I can't emphasize how important it is to plan your project and think about the time scale, and then work out the budget that includes things like your time. You might all be volunteers, but if you're putting in some time to deliver and manage a project, perhaps you're taking time out of work in order to do that. It's nice if somebody offers you an element of administration time that you can claim that back. If nothing else, it might go into help your group do something else. So find out from a funder how much money is available. Funders often have different amounts of funding available in different funding rounds, or depending upon what you want to do. So find out how long the funding is available for, as I mentioned before, and as Tila said, understand what the funder wants, understand what their application process is. Is the grant going to be paid up front? We don't pay grants up front. We tend to reimburse people. That sometimes happens. We can make exceptions to that, but that's an important consideration if you don't have a lot of money sitting in your group's bank account. Find out what the funder will let you spend the money on. As I said, not everybody pays for staff costs. A lot of people don't pay for things like running costs, but some people do. So it could be that you want some equipment. It could be you want information boards. A lot of people these days don't pay for leaflets, but they will make a contribution to sort of softer, more digital media and advertising. Equally important is to find out what the funder will not pay for. So somebody recently claimed their grant from me, and they had included receipts for catering. We don't pay for food, we pay for capital costs. So we'll buy your tools and pay for your trees or your boards for making hexagonal beds, but we won't pay for the party that you've had to celebrate the fact that you've got a grant. Sometimes people will not pay for religious or political activities, and this is because they want the project to benefit everybody in the community without there being a barrier to age or gender or religion, things like that. Sometimes you can reclaim VAT, sometimes you can't. So knowing what you can spend money on from a funder is just as important as what you can't spend your money on. And then when you're writing your application, a good hint I was given a long time ago, a bit like Tila saying don't use flowery adjectives, think of your application form as being read by a bright 12-year-old. So they don't know what you're talking about, they don't understand jargon, they have a short attention span, and they can easily be distracted by something else, whether that's something good on the telly that's on in the background or the 101 other grant applications they're reading through. So just use simple English and answer all the questions that you're asked, and in the way that you're asked. So if it says, tell us this in less than 300 words, please don't write more than 300 words. I can't tell you how irritating that is. If it says send a Word document, don't send a PDF. It's just following instructions. Very often, funders want to see a site plan and a location map. And you might not know this, but that might be because they're going to see you and have a little quiet recce without you being aware. Always take photographs before your project starts. You know, whether or not they're asked, then you can demonstrate, and this is, as Eleanor said, part of the monitoring of what you've done and how things have changed. Most funders will ask for comparable quotes. So talk to your funder about that, because the standard is to ask for 3, but a lot of contractors won't quote easily, or it could be difficult to get quotes. So I often have conversations with people about this to make it easier for them. If you're doing something, then your funder might ask for a specification for the methodology. How are you going to do it? And that's so that they understand that you understand what's involved. We have a question that says, you know, what are your plans for looking after this in the longer term? Again, that's sort of part of thinking ahead. Nobody wants to give you money if it's then going to be wasted. They want to see that it's been worthwhile, spent well, and it's a worthwhile project. So, you know, personally, I think it's better to find the right funder and to submit a carefully worded application than to do a scattergun approach, because you won't get a good success rate. It really is an 80-20 rule. And if you send out lots of applications that haven't been carefully thought through, it doesn't reflect very well on you as an applicant. And funders do talk to each other. And yes, you can often find that you can cut and paste. As I think Tila said, you know, very often you're asked the same question by different funders, and once you've got that information from somebody in your group, you can then use that in a different application. Sorry, I'm not really reading what I'm saying on my slides, so because I'm telling you other things. Please may I have the next slide? Is there another one? Ah, that's about us. So just before we go to that, if your application is successful, then the important thing is managing your grant. Very often a funder will ask you to send back an acceptance letter or sign something to say you agree to their terms and conditions before a project can start. Most funders don't fund things retrospectively, so it's important to not start until you're allowed to start, if you see what I mean. Eleanor mentioned publicity, so I won't talk about that more, but funders will want you to do that and will want to be credited for giving you some money. You need to manage the budget. You need to think about your audit trail. You need to take lots of photos. You need to evaluate it. What have you learned? How many people have got involved? What did people say? What went well? What didn't go very well? Would you do differently next time? All those sorts of questions are quite common at the end of a project, and so think of them about it in advance so that you can answer the question when you have to. So keep copy invoices, keep photos, and monitor it. You might be asked to monitor things for a year or 5 years or even longer.
Sorry to interrupt, Rachel. I'm just aware of the time. We've got about 12 minutes left of the session.
That's
just
fine. I think I've got
yeah,
about 4 slides left.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay.
Great.
So
Thank you.
in terms of TOE, we give grants of up to £15,000 now for those sorts of projects, things that make it easier for people to get to green spaces in the countryside, things that support nature, or connect people with their local green spaces and with nature near where they live. We fund not-for-profits, so including unincorporated groups, Jemima, so that might work. We ask you about your group, your site, your project, your budget. We use a Word document because we know that sometimes in groups different people fill in different sections of an application, and we can find time to fund time to administer your project. So what's my next slide, please? Probably just some examples of things we've funded recently. So if you're sharing these slides, I don't need to talk about that, and we have case studies on our website. Next slide, please. So, oh yes, that's sort of planting things and making it possible to replicate easily. If funders have case studies on their websites, then do look at them. Next slide, which is probably my last one. Oh, okay, access things. I was talking to Andy and Dave about that earlier. We'll talk separately. And then get in touch, I think, is the last slide, isn't it? So if you've got oh, no, I missed one. We also give grants, not just for capital work, but for improving voluntary species recording in both Berkshire and Oxfordshire. So if these slides are going to be circulated, then you can read all those, and there's more information on our website. And I'll leave it there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. That's so helpful. And so much detail there as well. Loads for people to think about. So, I mean, as I say, we've got about 10 minutes left of the session now, and it'd be any questions that people have, please feel free to chip in.
Can I just add something that I didn't get the chance to say earlier? In terms of like finding grants, what has worked for us at Banbury Community Action Group is that we talk to everyone about what we're doing. I constantly share things on my personal social media just because I'm so interested in what I'm doing. And this is how people who know me tend to send me links like, oh, have you seen this grant application? And it's basically people who know what you're doing, who are finding things that like fit.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically talk to everyone and anyone who wants to listen to what you're doing, because it's amazing what other people have access to.
Yeah.
So
kind of building.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, especially other groups who are doing similar work. Yeah. I found out about the TOE scheme through the Tree Collaborates, for instance. So like being part of different groups that are doing similar work to yours. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tila. Yeah, I think that's so important, that idea of, there's the kind of the group network, the personal network, all these different places that can be tapped into. I'm just putting my email address in the chat for anyone who wants to follow up with any questions at all. Yeah, did anybody else have anything they'd like to ask? Andy, was your hand up?
Can you just say thank you of the we are volunteer led. What that means, we're a community bus company, and what that means is that Dave Miles, who's on there with me, we don't receive a penny for the 40 or 50 or whatever, how many hours a week we put in to keep our bus service running. But we are identifying projects that will help the whole bus service kind of fit in the community. And I mentioned one in the breakout session. And the idea that although we don't personally take any money out of the organisation or out of the project, that we can charge our time as part of the project bid is very helpful, because obviously it's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a full-time job just running the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Never mind thinking about other projects that could make it fit nicer in the community. And we haven't done that in bids we've done before. I think we've kind of put in bids which have been for the materials and left it at that. And really, you know, we are putting in a lot of effort. We may be getting design help from various people that might be freely given in, say, like, I don't know, we did branding for our buses, and that was, you know, freely given, but it is an opportunity cost of our administrative help of thinking about the whole project and running it to a successful conclusion. So to be able to add that into the budget process, at least does not then detract from the rest of the business.
Yeah.
If that's a
Yeah,
sensible way of
definitely.
looking at it.
Yeah, and I think also that idea, I know Tila was talking as well about the number of partners that Banbury CAG works with locally, and thinking about that, because I know there's so many different ways that you could kind of look at the work of first and last mile, aren't there, around, it's obviously around kind of carbon reduction, shared journeys, active being active in that way, but also the kind of social mobility aspect of it as well, I think is really important. So who, you know, are there different providers locally or other organizations who have a slightly different focus, but where you could be putting in joint bids for things? It's quite a an exciting area really to think about the different opportunities there. Angela, did I see your hand up, or don't worry?
No, sorry, I'm just looking through my notes.
All good. Anyone else? Got about 5 minutes or so left. No. Okay. Well, I guess in that case, I will kind of wrap us up there. I'm sure everyone is quite tired at 8:30 on a Wednesday night, but thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you to Rachel and Tila for sharing all of their amazing experience. In terms of follow-up, we will send, as I say, we'll do a bit of a write-up, a blog post probably on what's been covered here. We'll share the slides and the recording so you can refer back to this if you want to. Our email addresses are in the chat. We'll share those as well in case you've got kind of more any other questions that you want to ask us. And also, so just to flag as well, we've got a few other workshops coming up if you're interested. So this Saturday, I will be co-facilitating a climate cafe at Common Ground in Oxford. That's a space not about action, but more around the kind of emotional processing of thinking about climate change, and a bit of a place for respite from the busyness of climate action, which I know everyone is so committed to all the time, so finding a bit of a different space for that. For the next 2 Wednesday evenings, we are running sessions on working with conflict, so thinking about kind of where conflict might arise in group work and how to navigate that. So we will share the links for signing up for that as well, and then the communications workshop will be on the 1st of December. And I'm sure that was way too much information to remember, so basically look out for your emails. We'll be following up with everything you need to know. But yes, thank you. We'll leave it there for tonight, but thank you so much everyone for joining, and we will speak to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.